Welcome to sportsbookreview.com. I'm Flash, and it's a different type of show today. We've got MLS starting in under a month, and today I've got a very, very special treat for you. But first of all, if you like this video, then please subscribe, press the button, and ring the bell. Ring the bell means I'll notify you, and you'll never miss any content again. And you know that we cover soccer throughout the whole of Europe. But now we're going to start talking MLS. And with me today is Tony Husband. He's award-winning journalist and lead commentator and an old friend of mine. Tony, how are you, sir? And it's good to see you looking so well.
And you, Flash. Yeah, it's fantastic to catch up. Seeing you, I bring back immediate memories of many of the times that we shared commentary boxes and press boxes across all parts of England, notably following, obviously, your old club, Southampton, and we did the divisions, didn't we, for sure, back in that era. So it's great to see you.
Yeah, it was very, very good times. But for those that don't know, you're obviously now organisation of Nashville Soccer Club. Can you give us a little bit of background of what you did in England and how this came about?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll try to kind of condense it a bit because it's a fairly long story. But essentially, as you know, I was a kind of 2 decades with the BBC, straight raw out of university, joined the organisation as a 21-year-old. It's a fantastic journalistic kind of training ground for anyone, a wonderful organisation, which I'll always hold dear to my heart. Had some fantastic opportunities there. Notably in sports, obviously, and in commentary, and had spells as the lead commentator for BBC Radio Solent, covering Southampton in their former Premier League guise, and then sadly kind of travelled down the divisions with them a little bit, but also covered the fortunes of the other teams on England's south coast. And gradually, from being a radio kind of play-by-play guy, as I explain myself these days over in these parts of North America, I progressed into working in television sports, and doing all sorts of reporting, and fortunate enough to travel, see a lot of things around the world, and actually combine my commentary with soccer, football, as most of the world knows it, with covering some other sports as well, notably track and field athletics, and covering some of the American sports, which is, I suppose, kind of the key to this, because I was always a huge fan of the NFL. I followed a bit of baseball and basketball and sports like that, and had my eye on, of course, this kind of blossoming league back in the mid 90s, when I was a very, very young man, that kind of formed after the 1994 World Cup, this thing, Major League Soccer. And as the years went by and I saw one or two other people kind of move over this way and get involved, I just thought, well, that would be a wonderful opportunity one day, a bit of a kind of bucket list kind of thing to do. If there was an opportunity to come across and spend some time working in this league. I always loved the production values and the style of American sports broadcasting, and I felt my style, could work. Last year, at the beginning of what was obviously a crazy year for the world, I just had this chance meeting. I was at St Mary's. I was covering Southampton against Tottenham in the Premier League. It was actually New Year's Day. John Champion is there, working that day for, I think it was BT Sport in the UK. I've known John for many years, bumped into him all over the place. And I just said to him, and I knew by that point, of course, he'd gone to ESPN in the States to become their main man for MLS. And I just jokingly said to John, you got the job I dreamed of, going over there to cover MLS. I'd love to do that one day. And it's funny how saying things like that sometimes can lead to one thing leads to another. So, before I knew it, John had actually said, well, I didn't realize that. And I'm really glad you told me, because obviously, I've got a few contacts. I know a few people are looking out possibly for, some more commentators. So, within a couple of days, I'd been connected to Nashville. And then very swiftly, we had some conversations. Both sides liked what we saw. And in a very, very swift kind of instant, really, I had to kind of make a call, do a stick with the BBC where I'm happy and enjoying myself and got a stable life and enjoying my job and the variety, or to really take a jump and have an adventure and do something that I'd always wanted to do. And one of the big keys was a conversation with my wife, who immediately said, no, let's do it. Let's have an adventure. We only get this one chance sometimes in life. And sure enough, we took the plunge and did it. Don't regret it at all. But of course, world events have made it more challenging, or more seat of your pants at times than we would have envisaged when we first made the decision to move. But nevertheless, We've absolutely loved it. It's tremendous experience being out here. And now we go into season 2 for Nashville. So really looking forward to
Yeah,
that.
I love the fact that you've actually experienced what a player goes through. So one minute you're actually happy, settled, you're in the BBC, you've been there 20 years, and then all of a sudden someone offers you the chance of a lifetime. But it's not as easy as that. You've then got to obviously speak to the family, and it's a leap of faith from both parts. Now let's go on to the soccer side of things, because Nashville, in their first season, they finished 7th. They have, listen, for me, I look at MLS sides and I think, hey, it's so important to not let goals in. And they were less than goal a game conceded. So that's a great foundation. And the manager is obviously from North London originally. I know he played for my local side, non-league Welling. So it's like, okay, so you're taking the football foundation of England and Europe over to the MLS, but how's the foundation for them in the second season? And were they happy with 7th?
I think you always want more, don't you? I think if we said to Gary Smith, are you happy with how it finished last season? I'm sure the competitive instinct inside of him would say, do you know what? We made it to in the playoffs, the Eastern Conference semi-final. And I've been thinking a lot about this actually as I look back on last season. Nashville were hugely, hugely underestimated, really, by the kind of national punditry. This was a team that was built exactly as you say, Flash, on defensive solidity, on being difficult to break down. Everybody who played Nashville had a tough game. There were no easy games at any of the opposition last season. It was a stability built from the back. I'm thinking of an old manager of yours, who always talks about goals against. Dave Merrington, the former Southampton manager. And I sometimes think of Gary, think of Dave when I listen to Gary and his drilling of that defense and the two players in front of the back four as well, who played so well, Annabelle Godoy and Dax McCarty.
If you know that you've got that backbone and listen, you could be like 0-0 for 87th minute and get your reward in the last 2 or 3. I mean, there's so many of these MLS sides that will go 2-0 down and hope to win the game 3-2. And the percentages say that you're not going to get your points.
No, that's absolutely right. And, the foundation, this was a foundation year for the club, with or without the pandemic. It was all about putting down some roots and looking long term. And a huge credit, I think, has got to go to both Gary Smith, but also the scouting department and the general manager, Mike Jacobs, who really, really put together a roster of players. They looked, obviously, of course, at their technical abilities and what they could do on the field. But as you know, Flash, they looked at what these people were going to do behind the scenes. They looked at what these people could bring to the locker room. And they brought together a collection of people who have bonded into, I must say, a really, really strong group. I'm sure there are many, many players in this roster who are probably enjoying the finest time of their soccer careers when it comes to the group they're in and the enjoyment and the fun they get out as teammates, working together. And, they were underestimated last year. I sense they might even be underestimated again a little bit this year. But do you know what? By the time they got to that Eastern Conference semi-final, they were beaten by Columbus Crew, who eventually won MLS Cup and by that point were comfortably the best team in the league. Do you know what? Nashville weren't far away. I mean, they pushed them to extra time. They were, into the final kind of 8 by that point when they got into conference semi-finals. But I think Nashville were probably on form, a hot team in the, which is what it's all about by the business end of the season. Probably one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the league for year one. That's sensational, really, and so full credit to them for that.
No, and I always say, and people think to me, recruitment is the number one thing in any sport and any organisation, because you have the chef, who's obviously your manager, but you've got to have the recruitment that go out and give him the right ingredients. Now, I think it's a good time to obviously congratulate Alistair Johnson, who's 22-year-old midfielder from Nashville, who's just been called up by the Canadian national side. Now, that there spreads throughout the team. He'll have teammates going, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And it's a knock-on effect in a massive positive way.
It is indeed. And, Jack Mayer will come, I'm sure, into the reckoning a little bit this year, who was another draft pick, who was Nashville's first pick in the Super Draft last year, didn't get a lot of game time because of the brilliant performances of Walker Zimmerman and Dave Romney in the central defensive positions. But Alistair Johnston came in on that right-back slot. And, from being someone who you don't know what you're going to get necessarily with a draft pick in American sport. You hope for the best, but you're prepared that it may not come off. Alistair Johnston made huge strides and rewarded now by his place with the Canadian national team. But as you say, Jack Mayer, a very good friend of Alistair's, will look at that and think, well, maybe this year might be my opportunity with the schedule being so busy and people potentially being away. There's always the possibility, of course, of injuries and things during the course of a season. So it spreads, doesn't it? You see an Alistair Johnston do so well, and others will follow in their path.
Do you see like the foundation of the MLS now? They've learned from their mistakes because obviously in 1994 when the World Cup was there, and I had teammates that were involved in the Stars and Stripes national side, and we thought that it was geared and ready to go. And then it drifted away. So this time you've got obviously the East and you've got the West Conference. Do you think there's like any chance that the lower sides, because obviously John Harkes, who's my former teammate, he's at Greenville Triumph. And when I spoke to him last year, I always feel that in soccer or in football, relegation and promotion is so important because it gives teams to strive, but also it produces that sort of intensity of you do not want to be relegated either. So then that will prove very competitive.
Yeah, I mean, all I can go on the relegation promotion discussion is kind of what's been publicly said by people in the past and what the feeling is. I mean, at the end of the day, the way MLS is obviously set up in a very different way to most leagues around the world, almost any league around the world, a kind of single entity as it is. The clubs, are insulated by knowing that, they have some certainty over their spending. And I think that is just very similar, obviously, to the other North American sports. In the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, you don't see teams relegated. I mean, some people, have publicly said, it'd be a good thing. Others would argue that, it's best off the way it is. I mean, personally, from my experience of the first year, do you know what? It didn't actually really register with me too much that, hey, we're not dealing with a relegation fight here. But I think that was because the playoffs, are quite open last year. 10 teams from the Eastern Conference, actually, for one special year, were able to get in the playoffs. So I think rather than the emphasis on looking behind, is there a relegation battle? Everything was about, the playoff chase. And of course, that's part of the culture of North American sports, isn't it? It's about postseason. It's about the drama of the playoffs. It's one and done. That's how they judge their champions here, rather than just who finishes top of the league. I mean, Philadelphia get the Supporters' Shield and are acknowledged as the Supporters' Shield winners. But Columbus, who won the playoffs, are MLS Cup winners. So I think MLS, for me, it works in the format it's in. But, as things evolve and develop, I think those discussions will always be around because, it's a pretty blossoming league below as well, with the amount of teams that are in the USL and some of the ambition of those clubs as well. So, I think time will tell. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next few years on that kind of debate.
Yeah, well, it's great because all you want is players to be competitive. And then the big one for me is always about how you keep your homegrown talent. We're seeing a lot of the American boys in Europe who are absolutely flourishing and they are flying. And obviously, they're going to enhance the national side when they come back, especially with the next World Cup after Qatar being in North America. So it's so important for the MLS to get to that standard and also know that they can play on a world stage.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one of the things that actually I've been really blown away by since coming over here, and now I spend so much more time, following US men's national team news and matches, and been watching the Olympic qualifiers. They've been going on down in Mexico as well, and I think, Flash, from what I see, there's a very, very promising era ahead for the United States men's teams in soccer, whether it be in World Cups, Gold Cups, Olympic tournaments. Should they secure their place in Tokyo, and yes, these homegrown talents, the league and the clubs they are willing to see these players progress and develop. And if that means a move abroad, and if that financially works well for the league over here, and that money is then reinvested into soccer domestically, then we will see a Daryl Dike who's on loan at the moment and really tearing it up at Barnsley. who knows? Will Orlando get him back, or will he be sold? It'd be interesting to see what happens with that. But you look at some of the, the real big names now that week in, week out in European soccer are associated with the United States. The Pulisics, the Dests, the Adams, and the likes of Brian Reynolds, who came through in Dallas last season. I mean, Brian Reynolds came in as a replacement for Reggie Cannon when Reggie Cannon was sold to Europe by Dallas. Brian Reynolds comes in, plays a kind of half a season at most. He makes such an impression. He's sold into Europe as well. There's a fantastic conveyor belt now of good young players coming through. And if the deal works for everyone, the player, MLS, the club, they'll go on to Europe and get their opportunities. And that's where the league is different from, perhaps from in the early days, obviously associated with importing players who, in many cases, clearly past their peak of their careers. Now they're looking to bring in players, young, homegrown, they've got potential, they've got talent, and they'll become stars here and then maybe go on and be stars elsewhere. And I think that's obviously it's a big emphasis now in the league moving forward, I think.
Yeah, I think that every time I cover near enough all the American sports, is they've all got a hero attached to them. So it could be LeBron James, it could be obviously Tom Brady, it could be obviously Judge in the MLB. Now we've got the likes of Pulisic, we've got the other boys that are playing in Germany, but we need to have an American star for these kids to strive, look up to, and say, that's a bit of me. Now, go back to the 94, you had obviously Harksey, you had Tab Ramos, Tony Meola, and then it just drifted away. So this is where I'm hoping that the foundation of the MLS now is we are now going to produce, and this gives you something as a young boy growing up, is because it's so massive in obviously North America, they have their big idols. Who do you think is going to be the next big idol that's in the MLS?
Cool. Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, I agree with you. I think you need those transcendent superstars, don't you? Who people know. Now in MLS over the years, of course, those really huge megastars have been foreign players. And I think probably you start that list with David Beckham, just for there's every association with kind of superstardom, then Zlatan and people like that have come subsequently. I mean, to give you one name is a tough call of the homegrown American who is going to be the next star. There's several players across the league who are impressing. Do we have I always think, I saw Gareth Bale make his debut for Southampton. You may well have been there at the same time. And I always remember the first time he crossed the ball with his left foot, this little lad who'd come on as a substitute. I thought, crikey, he can deliver a ball. But he came from nowhere, really. Now, there's somebody out there? There will be somebody out there across the league that that has got that talent to break out. We've seen, as I mentioned, the likes of Brian Reynolds, go from an unheard of, really, in August, September at Dallas. Now he's playing in Serie A. So it'd be very interesting. Picking one name, that's a tough one, though.
Okay. What are we going to expect from Nashville Soccer Club this year? Obviously, 7th last year, great start. What do we expect this year?
I think it's going to be another year of building in every sense. I mean, the club will move into a new stadium as well next year, the largest soccer-specific stadium in the United States. And I think the team will improve and be better. But of course, in the system that works in America, you have league and then you have playoffs. So they got to an Eastern Conference semi-final last season. That's a deep run for what was at the time a red-hot team in the playoffs. But Flash, from playoff football, anything can happen. So I think they'll be a better team. I think they have scope to be higher in the standings should things go right for them. And then the playoffs, well, it's a little bit of a lottery at times, isn't it? It's a one and done game again. Can they go deep? If they can get the momentum they had last season, they absolutely can. But, one of the great things we love about this game, of course, is it's the variables, isn't it? We don't know, what's going to happen over the next few months. We don't know how much the cluttered kind of international schedule is going to impact on all the clubs in MLS. You don't know whether how people's form will vary from year to year. You don't know about injuries. There are so many things that make it difficult to predict. But, if you're really pinning a prediction on me, I think they'll go higher in the standings. And then if they can recapture the form of the playoffs, and Gary Smith's very good tactically at one-on-one playoff matches. I mean, he took Colorado all the way to MLS Cup in his previous MLS guys.
I mean, that bears out, Tony. That bears out because he doesn't let goals in. I mean, that's the biggest foundation you can have. I mean, let's go back to when Arsenal 1-0 to the Arsenal. Nigel Pearson did it with Leicester City and got them into the Premier League, and they went on to be the biggest underdog to win the Premier League on the back of that basis of staying in games, and you will get your reward at some stage. Now, what about the 12th man? How have the fans adopted Nashville, and what sort of crowds are you hoping to see this year?
Well, we are obviously, in the restrictions of our, the pandemic that we're all living through. Just to remind people, Nashville kicked off their first game ever in MLS, last year, pre-pandemic, in front of 59,000 people in Nashville. This is a sports. I mean, Flash, I walk around this city and I break out into a smile about the potential. It is a true sporting city of America. They obviously have the Titans for the NFL. They have a really, really passionate following for the NHL team here, the Preds. And they have a groundswell of support for Nashville Soccer Club. And it was so frustrating, of course, last year. You get 59,000 for your first game. And then the next time the team played at home was right at the end of August. It's a closed stadium, a 69,000 seat stadium with nobody in it because of the restrictions we were living through. It looks like there will be, a reasonable opportunity to have attendance in Nashville when we kick off on the 17th of April at home to Cincinnati. The city is constantly revisiting the health guidelines and things, and what is a safe and secure environment for fans to come in. And the hope is, who knows whether we can get 10 to 15, 20,000, and maybe as the year goes on, maybe that attendance can grow. I mean, there's no doubt that it's kind of like the club, needs to get back out there again. We need to relaunch again. We need to remind people we're out there because, it was such a tough year last year with everything being shut down like it was. But the one thing about Nashville people, and I find that this really fascinating, and it's an interesting contrast perhaps with our homes, in England, is that, if you tell somebody from Nashville, well, we have a new major league team, and it happens to be a soccer team in this case, people will say, well, I now support them. I back them. I will buy their shirts. I will go to their games. I'm talking to people, some of which, they really don't know much about soccer. This is an absolute football hotbed in this part of the United States. They love college football, the SEC. It's religion to them at times. But you tell them they've got a team, on the soccer field now, and they'll say, right, well, I'm a fan of them as well now, even if I don't know too much about it. I'll learn and back the team. So, it's promising times ahead. And next year, the new soccer-specific stadium will have 30,000 capacity. It'll be an absolute, nod to everything that is Music City and the history and tradition of sports, music, and entertainment in this city. So the club's got a really good foundation to build from on that. So, it's a very, very positive outlook and one that I'm, excited to be part of.
Okay, well, that gives me, just to wrap it up, as in, good luck to Gary Smith. Let's hope that Tony Husband is calling plenty Nashville goals, and good luck to the whole organisation. And really appreciate the whole of Nashville Soccer Club allowing me to speak to lead commentator Tony Husband and old friend Tony. Good luck. And hopefully, the people here at SBR, they will send me to cover one of your games.
We'd love to have you, Flash. We'll give you a Music City welcome without a doubt. You would love it here.
Yeah, getting home would be the problem.
Yeah. Just maybe wait till later this year, hopefully.
Okay, listen, you take care. That's Tony Husband, Nashville Soccer Club. 7th last year in their first year. Don't let goals in. Don't oppose them. And let's cheer them on. You take care.